Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! So nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, now with this campaign, bang,
Hello, nerds! Welcome to the show, Corey. What do you got to say, buddy?
How's it going, man? That is quite the role of luminaries you got in that trailer, man.
All right. If I'm gonna add you to the trailer, I need you to say hello, nerds. I can't have you say how's it going, buddy.
Hello, nerds! Yeah!
Oh, Rio's in the house here. Rio, just in time, Rio. What do you say to start this show? Can you say hello, nerds, for us?
Hello, nerds.
Okay.
I think that was pretty lackluster. I'm not gonna lie. You could do better.
Corey's is a little more enthusiastic, but that's cool.
I saw the trailer. I mean, dude, you can't mess around like that. That trailer's full of people, giving it their best. That was not Rio's best.
Rio, can you say hello, nerds? Like let's get ready to rumble. That kind of hello.
Yeah. You mean it.
I don't think it's actually playing through my microphone. Is the problem? I don't know what's going. I haven't used this software before.
Blame the mic.
I'm talking to you through my computer.
All right, we'll get you on the. We'll get another hello from nerds from you in the future. I'm sure, Rio.
Okay.
All right, so guys, first of all, thank you for inviting me on your show in the past. And it feels like it was ages ago, but it was probably like a month ago, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, in election time, that's a long time, I think.
Yeah. And since then, a lot has happened. I think Bernie had a heart attack. Biden's son was sort of discussed in terms of his international business dealings. Warren's wealth tax has gotten a lot of attention, but we're still like number 5 or 6, which is a little frustrating. Even though we raised 10 million, like I guess I wanted to start off by just kind of getting a temperature read. How are you guys doing? How are you guys feeling about the movement?
Rio, you want to start or you want me to start?
Oh my gosh. Why don't you go first, Corey? Because I think I figured out how to fix my mic.
Excellent. Yeah, get after it. So the way I'm feeling now, I mean, I with the war chest that they've got going on, I think that's really, really good. The last debate was good. I'm still looking at all of the extremely high profile national senators and sort of people in the party that Yang is crushing right now. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's like, at any given time, 3 or 4 people ahead of him in the primaries. But from 0 to where we're at now is still a really, really big deal. And I've been seeing some people sort of in the movement that are like, oh my God, why aren't we like beating Biden yet? I'm like, nobody's even had a vote like at all. So like, cool your jets. And I mean, now it seems like the campaign is pivoting to the early states to put some real pressure on before the election. That's the biggest thing to me is those first 3 states. We need to outperform the expectation by a decent margin. And that sets Yang up to like be something that the media can't ignore, which means that we can keep chipping away at the blocks and have a real chance at coming from behind. And I still think, and this is a guess, this is a gut feeling, I think Biden's going to be the first one to drop out of the top 3. And, he's clearly targeting Biden's demographic.
What do you think, Rio?
Yeah. Okay. So it's actually working through my mic now, right?
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, good. Hello, nerds.
Much better.
There it is.
He's awake.
Yeah, I've got my coffee. That helps too. Oh man, I agree with Corey that Yang is definitely going for Biden's people. I wish that he was able to make more inroads into progressive circles. Like one of a recurring guests that we have on our show, AJ. He has kind of like jumped ship, and he's like Yang is his number 2 now instead of his number 1, and he's back to Bernie being his number 1. And I'm a little bit worried that the Yang gang is kind of. I think we're having a crisis moment right now, is how I would put it. And I think that we need to figure out what our strategy is, who we're trying to target, and we all need to take in mind who we alienate when we attack popular Democrats. Right. Because he is running in a Democratic primary. This is coming from somebody who's a former Republican, conservative Democrat, who's basically just here because I'm a never Trumper. and I've got to tell you guys, you can't win a Democratic primary just trying to get Trump voters. and if part of getting Trump voters is alienating people who like Hillary Clinton, that's probably going to lose us the election. So I think the Yang Gang needs to like have a come to Jesus moment and rethink our strategy a little bit.
So you think the gang is too negative about which other candidates, like all of them, or?
I think that like being anti-establishment is something that is okay. And I think Yang himself is smarter about the way he does it than Bernie Sanders is. He doesn't attack the party in the same way that Bernie does. So he doesn't alienate the moderate conservative establishment Dems to the same extent that Sanders does. But the downside of that is Sanders and Warren have really kind of locked down the progressive vote. And it's really hard to get anybody out of that group to join Yang Gang, even though Yang has in many ways very progressive policies. So I would just caution people to, before they speak on the internet, because, you know, Yang Gang, we got Yang this far, right? He came from absolute obscurity to being something like 4th place, and that's amazing, right? That didn't happen for no reason. That was because of us. But now, like, I mean, now people are paying attention to what he says, and they're also paying attention to what his supporters say on the internet. And so before we say something on Twitter or wherever, we should ask ourselves, like, is this going to increase the odds that people who like Hillary Clinton vote for Yang, or is not? Is this going to increase the odds that people who like Bernie Sanders vote for Yang or not? And doing personal attacks on those people or attacking the party is not a recipe for winning a Democratic primary, in my opinion.
So what would be an example where you've seen a Yang Gang member sort of cross that line from having honest differences with the other candidates to like just kind of alienating that other candidate's supporters? Like how far is too far? Like as an example, I often talk about how Warren would do very poorly in the general election. And I think she would have a lot of trouble with independents and moderates, and we'd end up losing the White House.
No, I think that kind of stuff is completely. I think that kind of stuff is completely fine. Yeah, and it's also fine. It's fine to talk strategy. It's fine to talk policy, right? It's the personal attacks is what people don't like that, you know, like I like personally, I despise Bernie Sanders, right? I like Warren personally. I happen to think
you despise Bernie Sanders.
I despise it.
Don't.
I happen.
He's seriously, he's
but
gonna
notice
be like,
I said personally before that. I didn't say, oh, he's a cranky old Jew and everybody hates him or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like with Hillary Clinton, I've heard people like call her like misogynistic names, like they or even, you know, like disagreeing with her about foreign policy is fine, but Queen Monger throwing out that's like a Trump low blow bullying nickname that does not sit well with people who like Hillary Clinton, and that's a lot of Democrats.
Yeah. A lot of people are currently in the chat talking about the latest polls. Let me just share some data. In 1 second, we can discuss it. Tell me if you can see this.
I can.
So I think people are talking about this New Hampshire, the UNH poll, CNN UNH, where Yang came in at 5. Ooh, ahead of Harris.
Yeah.
So we're number 5 in New Hampshire. Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. I think that's qualifying for the debate, isn't it?
Yeah,
5%.
Brian Kitching just said that's supposed to be qualifying. So nothing wrong with that.
On the other hand, you look at the latest Morning Consult, 3%. So that's kind of like normal now. And then Arizona, 5, ahead of Harris as well. Look at old Harris seem to be drifting away maybe, huh?
Right.
I like that.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Is that are we encouraged? I don't know. How do you guys interpret this?
I still say, you know, I think what he's got planned for the early states is going to be epic and a huge crush. I hope that everyone within, you know, earshot of our voice signs up for at least text banking, if not phone banking. Like that focus is going to be in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina again to make sure that we outperform the expectations there. You know, there's work to be done there. So yeah, I mean, I was just posted on Twitter today. Like 3 years ago, I was the only person that I knew talking about UBI. And now it's just some part of the thing that we actually talk about. So as far as I'm concerned, we've already won. And now it's just a matter of actually, putting the nail in the coffin and doing the crazy thing, which is actually getting Yang to the presidency, which again is still entirely plausible.
Part of it too is the whole Yang or bust thing. That doesn't play for a lot of the same reasons as what I've just said. Like one thing most Democratic voters have in common is they don't like Trump. At all, right? And so when somebody says Yang or bust, and the Bernie people do it too, Bernie or bust, like basically what they're doing is they're alienating something like 80% of the Democratic electorate because because what they hear is, if my guy doesn't win, then I'm just going to blow the whole thing up and go full Donald Trump. And that's going to turn a lot of people off. Something else.
Or in our case, it's 95%.
It's okay to say, it's okay to admit when Yang makes a mistake, right? So like if he says something that, he's a rookie, he hasn't been a politician that long, and even like seasoned politicians make mistakes. If he makes a mistake, it's okay to say, hey guys, I hear that like he probably shouldn't have said that. But you know what? Here's why we should still back Yang anyway, because he's the best candidate, because he can beat Trump, and because he has the best policies. And even though he misspoke in that case, he actually has a track record for being very well-spoken and likable. You're actually going to convince more people by showing that you're able to admit when your guy makes a mistake, as opposed to reflexively defending something he says that is clearly causing problems, right? So like the Shane Gillis thing is a good example of that. Regardless of your personal opinion about it, I openly criticize identity politics all the time, right? But a lot of people were really turned off by that. And so instead of defending him over it, you might consider saying like, look, I understand that, you're upset that he said that. And I can see where you're coming from there. Maybe he shouldn't have said it. However, here's all the other reasons why you should vote for Yang. It gives you more credibility.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the same way we don't appreciate it when people are almost religious in terms of their loyalty and support for anything Trump does. Like, we don't want to be accused of being that about Yang either. And I mean, I'm not in the Yang or bust camp. I am definitely in the, geez, if we don't nominate Yang, I'm really worried we're going to lose the White House camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good argument you can make without pissing people off.
No.
Well, it's definitely fair. Because I mean, no matter what, we need to be in a position where we're confident we can beat him by 10 points to get in the way of all the externalities that are likely to have an effect on the race, assuming that he's still in office, which I think is not at all certain. Because we have no idea what kind of information campaigns are going to get put on, how much they're willing to cheat at the actual ballot box, because we know they can get hacked. Like it's got to be a blowout if we're going to have a chance. And that's I think the best criticism of Warren that I've seen. Again, she was my favorite in 2015. I've got a lot of friends working here in Pasco County for her campaign. It's close, and that should be terrifying. Like that's the electability argument, even though it tends not to usually play out the way the sort of common wisdom suggests that it will over time. It's going to be a huge impediment to see her break the sort of 25 or 30% margin that she's been pulling.
Who would you rather? Let's just make believe for a moment that Yang got the nomination. Who would you rather go against, Trump or Pence?
I don't care. I mean, I would rather, assuming, for me, it would almost be better. I want him impeached and gone for precedent for whole years, but just in the microcosm of this suggestion, I would love to go after Trump because I want to crush him. Like, I want Trumpism itself to die sobbing and pathetic and whimpering on the side of the road, right? Like, I want every single Republican running on a ticket with Trump to fucking lose. Right, like everything that's brought us all of the kinds of ways that he talks about shit, the complete narcissistic, egomaniacal stuff, the fact that they're making things up every 5 minutes, the fact that they're lying constantly. I want that to die sputtering in a gutter. So you want a
clear, open, public referendum against Trumpism and the whole Trump way of leading
versus Pence, who honestly will just be able to beat, and then it's like, oh great, we get to beat a Republican.
What do you think, Rio? Rio, are you going back to Republican Party if Pence gets the nomination?
How do I put this? Pence would be a huge improvement over Trump, and I think that if Republicans in the Senate were able to vote anonymously, they would have impeached Trump already. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like they're replacing him with Nancy Pelosi. They're replacing him with Mike Pence.
Yeah.
I think that we would have an easier time beating Pence. And for like it or not, Trump is a polarizing figure. There are almost as many people who love him and think that he's the second coming of Jesus Christ, as there are people who hate him and think he's the devil. And Corey's right. For the sake of the Republican Party, and I believe for democracy to work, you need to have, like it or not, we have a two-party system. And so in that system, both parties need to be relatively healthy, right? They both need to stand up for basic values that used to bring us Americans together. So the Republican Party needs to lose for its own sake so that it can rediscover its center and its like small government, fiscally conservative roots and get away from this divisive, polarizing, racist, fascist nonsense.
Yeah, the other thing about if Trump were impeached, in a way, it's almost like a martyrdom for him in that his supporters will say, well, he was a victim of this this conspiracy, this deep state, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, I mean, they would probably make excuses if he lost in the general. But I think we could make a stronger argument that, look, America spoke. It wasn't just a handful of congressmen and senators, but the whole country decided that they didn't want him anymore, you know, and it was very clear. So I think, yeah, I tend to agree with you guys from hey, America needs to kind of turn the page and do it in a really clear, open way. I would like to beat Trump in the general. However, in terms, if you flipped it and you're like, well, what would be most likely to get Yang in the White House? I almost feel like I'd rather go against Pence.
Yeah,
I think Pence would be a weaker candidate.
I'm not necessarily sure that that's true. Like it, and again, like I'm very much pro impeachment because if we can't impeach a guy like this, then we might as well just have kings because it won't matter. Just on a like rule of law process kind of argument. But Trump's negatives by the time we get to the election are going to be far, far worse than they are now. And Pence can just come in as like the Republican, like, no, we just want to lower your taxes a little bit in Rio. Everything's going to be fine. Fuck that guy. Like that.
Well, I mean, if it was Pence v. Sanders, I would vote Republican.
I know you would. God damn it. Anyway, it's.
But if he was against Yang, I'm Yang gang, guys. Yeah.
There you go. You know, small wonders.
One thing that if Trump were impeached, I could see a strong turnout for Pence. Maybe Pence wouldn't be that weak, partly because he would get people like Rio if Yang were not the nominee, but also there would be a lot of people who are pissed about the impeachment who would say, oh, we're going to show those Democrats.
So, yeah, this is where
in a Trump world, there's just a no-win outcome.
Yeah,
he's made sure of that.
It's not good. It's and he's already tried to
I'm going to screw you no matter what.
Yeah, and he's already tried to throw Pence under the bus, like basically saying like Pence was implicated as well because he's hoping that makes senators less likely to vote for his own impeachment, which is incredible. Not surprising, but.
It's a horrible, cynical strategy, but yes, that's exactly what he's doing. Trump is all about his own personal aggrandizement and survival. He doesn't care about the country. He doesn't care about his own party. He's destroying the GOP brand. He's actually increasing the odds that we're going to get a far left like takeover of the U.S. government. So yeah, like it blows my mind that any conservative would like that guy.
Yeah. Now, here's a question from the audience. Maria Slangelis wants us to discuss the super PAC issue. Are you guys pro or against super PAC supporting Yang?
I definitely want to cover this. I want to give Austin Mann a shout out because he actually just became one of our patrons. Thank you very much. You're freaking awesome. Just recognize the name down in the comment threads. So super PACs, I've been very much against them for a long time. But when it comes to Yang, I mean, Rio and I were talking about starting one, right? So like if Rio and I started a PAC, and like say the three of us, we started a PAC right now and we raise $1 million for Yang, is that evil? right? But at the same time, like, do we, if I don't know, ExxonMobil started a PAC and wanted to like push for Yang, would I feel super weird about that? Yes. But here's where it gets. I love the fact that he's released 180,000 million freaking policies that Rio and I go over every time that, we do a podcast, right? We deep dive on this stuff all the time. The way that I think we have a pretty good idea of the way that he processes data and creates solutions and then pushes relentlessly for those solutions until he accomplishes them, right? So like, that's a little bit different than Buttigieg, for example, coming in saying like, oh, I'm for this. And then, some healthcare company gives him money and now it's suddenly totally different, right? Like or O'Rourke could do the same thing because he's getting crap loads of oil money from Texas stuff, right? So it boils down to me to trust. And I really do have an immense amount of trust in this particular candidate in a way that I haven't before. So I'm open to it, especially if it means, frickin' winning.
So it's okay winning for our guy, but not for the other guy.
I think I might be trying to hedge there. Yeah, like seriously, like if there are other people coordinating with super PACs where it just smells really, really bad.
I think it's okay for everybody.
You would.
I've actually defended the Citizens United decision. I think a lot of people don't understand the way that super PACs work. They think that it means that like, okay, yes, a corporation can give unlimited sums of money, but individuals within that corporation still have a cap that's comparable to the individual cap for a regular donation. And so for them to be able to have that money, they need to convince thousands of their employees to give money to the PAC. So it's almost like a union or something, right?
No, they don't. They don't. Yeah. No, they don't. The corporation run by and owned by one person can just say, I'm going to give this candidate $1 million.
Corporations can, yes, but the money that goes into the corporate PAC, there are caps on what individuals can contribute to that. So you have to. This is a common misunderstanding. A lot of people don't understand how that works. But let's set that aside for a second. The main thing is, and I agree with Corey about this, it's about trust, right? So money isn't going to leave politics. Yang very intelligently has this democracy dollars policy, which is like, instead of saying we're not going to let people donate money to campaigns, because I think if people want to donate money to campaigns, they should be able to, right? It's a free country. Instead of saying people can't donate money to campaigns, he's saying let's give every American citizen $100 and let them vote with their democracy dollars and donate it to the person they want. They will drown out the corporate money, and that's just a better solution. It also doesn't require a constitutional amendment or something like that, or even a Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah,
in order
pragmatically, yeah. At the end of the day, while we could sit here and argue about Citizens United for 7 hours, that's the thing. They would argue the same way over and over and over again. We would never get anything done on that, which is what Yang has figured out. The democracy dollars is, as usual, an elegant way to just circumvent the whole conversation that's going on now and just find and create a solution that would have just a dramatic impact on creating engagement. Like, imagine how much more people would be engaged in democratic life in the United States. If everybody had $100, they had to use or lose. You've got to give it to a candidate. Now candidates know this, and instead of going to high dollar fundraisers, the campaigns will look a lot more like Bernie's, a lot more like Yang's, a lot more like the people that are actually creating grassroots movements already. So I think it would be awesome.
Yeah, and Corey and I just exemplified productive disagreement, which is something that our show's all about. I'm on the right, he's on the left, and instead of spending an hour yelling at each other every day on the podcast, we tried to get along and find compromises.
It's usually about 25 minutes of yelling, usually around.
I buy that. You
gotta most of the yelling. I'm usually just smirking in a snobby way.
I can confirm that's exactly how that works.
Here's my argument for super PAC that's a little different, but we all end up in the same place. My argument is I don't believe in unilateral disarmament. And if all the other candidates are getting money through these super PACs, like, we're not going to win any points by saying, well, I guess we're not going to take money either, because then it's just an unfair playing field. Now, once we win, we can support new legislation if we want. I know, Rio, you're not in favor of it, but Corey and I can support. Well, we could all support democracy dollars and wash all that corporate money out. But until that's the case, like, you got to play by the rules of the game as it's written, and you're not going to be like, oh, well, I think it's unfair to throw the ball in football, so we're just going to do a running game. Like, no, we're going to do everything that everybody does to win. And that would be my argument, because otherwise, why would we kind of harm ourselves for,
yeah,
on
I
principle?
agree with that too. Setting aside the disagreement about the actual law. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that as a strategic argument. It's undeniable. And I would compare it to the Me Too movement, actually. I think that there are cases where the left has caused a lot of problems for themselves in a way that only helps their enemies, And so, like, the crazy thing about the Me Too movement is, we got a guy in the White House right now who publicly or on a recording talked about assaulting women in vulgar language. You would think evangelicals wouldn't have liked that, but he's against abortion, so they're okay with it. So, like, clearly what's happening is the Democratic Party is kind of eating their own, right? They're taking out. We just said Congresswoman just resigned over it. Like, they're taking out their own people, and by definition, the other side doesn't care, and so all they can really do is hurt their own side, right? And this thing about money in politics is another one. All you're going to do is help the other side win. So maybe we should focus on winning. Yeah,
no, I buy that. Let me show you guys one other thing. Hold on.
Yeah, thank you for pulling that up.
Let's show you this Warren popularity with activists, early state activists.
Huh.
Now, if you can see this is a share of activists who said they were considering a candidate or committed over time. And you see Warren, actually, Harris had 61% in November of 18. That's really interesting. Wow, Harris still has strong activist support, and Booker. Ew. But you look at Yang, man, we're struggling with the activists. Freaking Steyer has more activist support. I don't know how they define activists, but it's a little bit disturbing. Yeah. How it feels like a lot of this stuff, like there's no reason Klobuchar should have this, in my opinion, should have this much support. I feel like this is just activists going with like the usual suspects.
Right. Activists for what? Like, hey, definitely don't change the dinner or the potluck time at church. Like, that's what they're activists for. If they're for Klobuchar, that's about the biggest thing.
Like these are like the super.
Klobuchar is like the female Biden.
Hyper status quo is what I would call that. Yeah, I can confirm the Warren thing on the ground here. I'm active in local Democratic and progressive politics. Here in Pasco County. And Warren's been a clear favorite for months.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry, Corey. What state is Pasco County in?
Oh, it's in Florida. We're just north of Tampa.
Got it.
It's a red county run by a bunch of Republicans, and it's getting run into a ground homeless. I think that the actual homeless population is the third highest in all of Florida, not per capita, but actual homeless people in Florida, which of course includes Miami and Tampa and everything else. So we've got some major league issues, and all of it is extremely predictable if you've ever seen how red counties or states work.
I got to imagine UBI would be kind of a game changer for homeless people, right?
We talk about it all the time. My buddy Greg, I do another sort of progressive politics, again, mostly just ranting about Trump now. 3 days a week, we talk to local guests and just talk about the news or whatever. We talk about that constantly. Like, I bring it up all the time. Like, he has been working in the sort of homeless issue space for quite a while here locally, and just it cannot be overstated how much of a difference that would be.
Yeah.
To the point where, Warren brings up anything in the financial thing, like, hey, maybe we'll give you an extra $200 when you retire. Fucking meaningless to somebody who's homeless. Like, just completely and totally doesn't mean anything to them at all. And Harris with her Lyft thing, like, hey, we'll give you an extra $500 per family as long as you're working. Well, cool. Well, the homeless people don't really, like, just they're no one except for Yang is offering solutions that are even remotely close to solving homelessness and poverty and the situation for the working poor by like 2 orders of magnitude. It's not even close, which is basically one of the top reasons that I'm Yang Gang and freaking loving it.
I'm still processing the activist data because that's really interesting, and I wasn't aware of that. Although you definitely see it on Twitter, like I'm mostly in the Yangosphere on Twitter, but then like every now and then, like one Bernie bro will come in and comment, and the next thing you know, like there's this just like I don't know, like a hurricane of them that just comes in and it's crazy. Twitter is not real life, and activists are on there. Regular voters aren't on there. But like Corey said, how do we define what an activist is? Like, did you know in that data, Tom? Like, how do we define what an activist is? And then once we know that, maybe we can speculate about why Yang isn't doing better with them. Because the thing about activists is they actually phone bank, right? They don't just get in arguments on Facebook.
They do work.
Phone bank. They go out, like they hit the pavement. They knock on doors. Like they do the real work. And Yang can't win in those early states without those people.
Yeah, he doesn't. It's in a 538 blog post. He doesn't define what is an activist, but it's a very small number of people he's interviewing these 30 activists over time. He's a professor at the University of Denver. He's writing a book about American politics. And I think if it's only 30 people, that to me suggests that these guys must be like really active, like organizing,
right?
Doing events, stuff on the ground,
like professional activists.
Yeah, almost.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even actually, that's a class of person.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, it's interesting. The thing about what were we talking about before we got back on the activists? Corey, what were you mentioning just now?
We were talking about homelessness.
Oh, the homelessness thing. Yeah. So here's my argument about the homelessness thing. And I'm probably going to offend some people. Jeez. But whatever. It's the internet.
Hey, I do a podcast with Rio. You're good.
Yeah, that's right.
I probably pissed off a couple of people already.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to really step up your game.
All right. Also, that reminds me. I just want to clarify for the more kind of for the Nerds for Yang audience that isn't used to chatting with Rio. I think, Rio, when you were talking about Bernie, you were giving an example of what some people might say about Bernie.
Yes. Yeah,
but that wasn't
sure.
how you felt.
That was not something that I would say about it. My point was, don't say that.
Okay, he wouldn't say that in public.
No, God, no. There's something about juicy stuff. No, I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying, like, personal insults is not a good way to go, because you're not going to convince people who like that person to support you by insulting the person who they like.
And even the people that you're talking to, assuming that you're never to convince that Bernie bro on Facebook or whatever, right? Like that, there's like I have activist friends of mine that they've been with Bernie Sanders for 3 years. They're fully in the tribe. They're not coming out, right? Yang is their second. Right. So like that's we've gotten that far. But in conversations with those kinds of people, always think that there's 10 people that are on the fence that are reading that whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, like while we're sometimes critical of the Yang Gang, like there's examples that have come up. The vast majority of feedback that I've seen that I get back is that people are in the Yang Gang are exceptionally positive, just bringing data, bringing patience, and doing really, really good. Right. Like, we can never be, we can never be good enough. Like we can always be better at that. But watching Crystal Ball from the Hill actually had a whole comment. She did I think a little takedown of Yang's healthcare position or whatever. And literally like 7 hours later, she said, ordinarily these conversations go totally badly, but the Yang Gang has been in here all day and, it was just a productive conversation. I was like, yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually wasn't worried about Yang Gang being a liability until the Tulsi Gabbard Hillary Clinton controversy happened. And then it was really disappointing to see, like, again, I personally like.
What did the Yang Gang do about the Tulsi Clinton?
So basically just like shit posting about Clinton and every single thread about that. Now, look, here's the thing. We Tulsi's a great lady. I disagree with her on foreign policy, but I don't have anything against her personally. She's at 1%, and 70% of Democratic voters like Hillary Clinton. So shit posting Hillary Clinton in order to defend a person only 1% of voters like is not good strategy. And that was the first time, that's the biggest example I've seen where the Yang Gang was a bit of a liability, in my opinion. You know, Yang himself said something that was, just kind of defending Tulsi, but his comment was very thoughtful. You could tell that he had talked to his staff about just the right wording, etc. It was the Yang Gang going in and defending Yang, and in doing so attacking Clinton. That's where the liability came in my opinion.
Well, let me share my offensive statement.
Yeah, we skipped right over the fun parts. Oh my god!
Although Rio set a high bar, so yeah. I'll see what I can do. So here's my position on the homelessness thing. I believe, and we can just say present company and the entire audience here excluded, but there are some Democrats who talk a big game about helping people in need. But when it comes to where the next homelessness camp is going to be set up, they are very eager to have it not be in their neighborhood. And my position is, look, if you're not going to want to have encampments all over the place, but you actually really do want to do something to be helpful, then universal basic income is the scalable way to solve the problem and retain, whatever neighborhood you want. But to say not in my backyard, and I'm not for UBI, but maybe I'll give like more credits to go to university so no homeless person will ever use it anyway. Like that's just kind of a lot of hypocrisy. I'd rather you just say you don't care, and just come out and say it. So that's my controversial.
Oh, I feel like
I don't feel like that was controversial in any way. I mean, I don't know that many Democrats here personally that are like that because they're all actually working on the problem and we're like fighting Republicans. But I can imagine like in Democratic run counties or states or towns or whatever, that would probably end up coming up. I don't think that's controversial at all. Like that people automatically think, oh, these people are going to be living near me. It's going to affect my business or it's going to affect my property value. And it's just easier to turn the other, just turn away from it.
Yeah. So clearly my definition of controversial is just not.
Yeah, seriously.
You guys are like, what the
fuck? Stuck.
Well, I think what you said, the reason you were concerned it might offend some people, Tom, is because you were being a little critical of the party, right? And I was just saying, like, let's not be critical of the party. But you focused on a specific policy, right? That was a perfectly good example of that. Some people do this and I would say this to them because this is a better solution to that problem. That's fine. No, I'm talking about the people who go in and say like, oh, the Democratic Party establishment is all corrupt and you can't trust the fake news. That when I listen to people like that, it reminds me of Trump voters. It reminds me of the Republican primary. And them saying, oh, the deep state and the GOP establishment and fake news, right? It's like exactly, it's a left-wing mirror image of exactly the same thing. And that might rile up very enthusiastic anti-establishment people, but the vast majority of voters in the Democratic primary are okay with the Democratic Party and don't think it's like this awful, corrupt institution. By the way, part of the reason some people in the Democratic Party maybe don't see some of these issues the same way isn't because they're corrupt and evil and they sold out to corporate America. And by the way, corporate America is a good thing, not a bad thing. But that's not why. It's because they have different opinions about politics than you, and like that. Classic liberalism is actually pro markets. It's pro capitalism. It's pro free trade. And, there's a tension in the Democratic Party between classic liberals like myself and social liberals who have more of like a compromise with socialism and more of a kind of a left-wing progressive bent. And that's fine. But we need both of those voters in order to win. And there are a lot of classic liberals in the Republican Party too, by the way. And that actually is the establishment in the GOP that Trump voters hate so much. The reason they hate the establishment of the GOP is because they're more liberal than Trump voters.
That last part, the reason why.
Well, for example, They believe in free trade, right? They believe
Right.
in small governments. They believe in free trade. They believe in low taxes.
Right.
Trump
You're saying
voters-
that the Trump voters don't like those types of Republicans.
No,
Right.
they want a combination of Bernie Sanders style social liberalism and kind of Nazi hate black people fascism.
Yeah, that's quite a cocktail.
Right? I was like, I wish the worst part about what he just said is how true it is. It's just
true.
like, we definitely want trade protectionism, but also we want to make sure all the brown people aren't in our country, and let's put up a big wall because that fucking makes sense. Excuse my French. Hopefully you can swear on this podcast. I swear.
It's all good.
Oh, and by the way, in a Democratic primary, making fun of Trump and Trump voters is okay, right?
Hard, yes.
By the way, Yang is getting a lot of Trump voters. He really is. Okay. But by a lot, we mean like 1%. If he in a general election, if he can get 1% of Trump's base away from him, that's amazing. That would be a blowout. That's the reason he will win the general election in a landslide, right? But he's not getting enough Trump voters in the primary to make up for alienating 70% of Democratic voters, right? So you got to focus on actually winning the primary because otherwise the rest doesn't matter.
Let me ask you guys this. We talked about how, hey, that weird activist research on 538 is kind of a small sample and it's just the activists. It's not all the voters. We talked about in the past, like sometimes the polls may be undercounting the strength of the Yang momentum.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this, and this will be available for posterity. What do you need to see in Iowa to feel like good about the Yang 2020 campaign?
May I?
Yes.
Of course.
I would like to see fourth or third place finish. And I think that where we're going to do really well is when they do these polls, they are polling likely Democratic voters. Rio is not in that category by like 18 million miles, right? So we know that Yang is going to outperform the polls the way that they're sort of naturally done these days. We have no idea if it's going to be by 1% or 10%. There's no way to know, right? So yeah, I'd love to see, and on the activism thing too, like they're not going to, especially with that like 30 people, it's not even, it's sort of old Democratic politics is probably where they're going to look for that, right? They're not even going to be looking at the kinds of communities that have sprung up around your podcast, around our podcast, around Padgett, around Scott Santon's. Like this is new, right? Like, so that I think we have the capacity to do some really, really interesting insurgency things. So yeah, if we get either, fourth or third place in Iowa, the media is going to be like, wait, what? And then again, the next day they'll try and ignore him, which means that when we go to New Hampshire, we're going to have to blow that out of the water too.
I'm going to mostly agree with you. I think it has to be third. I think fourth place won't cut it. Precisely what you just said, Corey. I think it's too easy to ignore fourth place. If he knocks one of the three front runners off, then that's a game changer because that is impossible for the media to ignore. And what you just said about the fact that, the polls aren't really picking up a lot of Yang's support, that's true, but it's going to be within the margin of error. So it might be 6% instead of 3%, which is amazing. That's twice as high. And that is entirely possible.
Right.
But it's not going to be 30% instead of 3%.
Right. Yeah. Right? Thank you for,
so the reason that like this happened with Trump, right? Especially in the general election where a lot of independents were kind of reluctant to admit that they were going to vote for him. Right. So the polls didn't quite pick up his support. Although even in that case that they did by and large track within the margin of error, the actual national vote. Right.
Yeah.
If you had looked at the polling data in swing states, might have been more predictive. So the polls weren't that off. Even in the case of someone like Trump, where there were a lot of people afraid to tell pollsters that they supported him. So the thing to keep in mind is that it gives Yang an advantage over his official numbers, but his official numbers need to be 15%, not 3% in order for that to matter.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like being closer to 15% in Iowa is like if we're at 5% before the election in Iowa, we're not going to get third or fourth place. Like that it won't happen.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take a slightly different position.
Go on.
I'm gonna say fifth in Iowa. I'm good with because that means we beat Harris. And then fourth in New Hampshire would be fantastic because that means we beat Buttigieg. And then, holy shit, it's all upside from there. I mean, once we knock off Buttigieg and Harris, and then you get to South Carolina, where I think we could have a surprise because I think Warren's pretty weak with African-American voters. And I think some of the latest YouGov data was showing black voter favorability for Yang is starting to pick up. So I'm okay if we do 5-4-3 for Iowa, New Hampshire.
Yeah, you
South
get to
Carolina.
it. Right. I agree with that. But the point being, when you get to 3, that's the real game changer where the media has to treat him as one of the front runners.
So
right?
you don't think a fifth place finish beating Harris would shake
I
things
think it
up?
would help us maybe get to a 3 in the future, but it also might not. Like his campaign could fizzle out because we have to keep in mind that in order for him to stay in the debates and stay in the news, he needs to be on an upward trajectory. And so, yeah, I mean, obviously, if he got 5th place and was ahead of Harris, or, if he gets a 4th and is ahead of Buttigieg at the second state, that's good. That's not bad. But is it enough to keep him in the news and keep him on the debate stage so that he gets 3rd place? Because that's the deal breaker, or game changer. He needs to get to 3rd place somewhere at some point fairly early.
You mentioned news. I have some data. Hold on.
Go on.
So this looks at the cable clips week over week. And you see basically, Biden getting about 40% of mentions, Warren 23%. Where the hell's Yang? Oh, God. 0.5%.
Right.
Yeah.
You see that shit?
Yeah. I mean, that's the amount of, well, and so this is the other thing too, that I'd love to get Zach's opinion on this. I think one of the things you can't take away from Trump is that he was a master at getting earned media. And now, granted, it was for being a complete fucking asshole, but it worked, right? Like the way you get it in the media is by saying completely and totally asinine things, and then they're just going on the media all the time and telling everyone, yeah, we're just gonna lock everyone up. It's gonna be great until you go to the World Series and it comes back to your face. But like that, I would love to hear what their strategy is for getting earned media and how they plan on doing a lot better at it.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the earned media, even freaking Tom Steyer, Castro got more than Yang. I mean, Booker, the media loves that guy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, these guys, and that's the thing too. These people have developed long-term relationships with the media that have taken years and years and years and years to cultivate, right? So we can't ignore that. That's just probably a relationship thing as well. But Steyer, I mean, he's paid for it, right? Hey, is it okay if I spend $10 million on your network and then go on the news? They're gonna be like, yeah, fine, okay, right? That's
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that is very disturbing is all that free media coverage is worth millions of dollars a week. I mean, when we outraise Booker, but then he gets 10 times more coverage than us.
Yeah.
It almost neutralizes our fundraising advantage. And in which case, the only way for us to really break out, if the media doesn't have a change of heart, is I think the whole Yang Gang needs to dig deep. I would argue this 4th quarter raise is this is the one where we either get it or we don't. Meaning, if we have an okay raise in the 4th quarter and then giving more early next year, I feel like it'll be too late. I think it's sort of like a startup. It needs the money early. Having the same amount of money a year later is not worth the same thing. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think this is a do or die quarter for us in the 4th quarter?
I think this relates to the super PAC thing. I think it's great that Yang has a super PAC. I think he may even have more than one. I'm not sure. I mean, obviously they're not officially affiliated with them, but it's great that they exist. And this is because of something that Corey and I talked about actually early on in our podcast. I think it came up in the first episode, which was our conservative case for Andrew Yang, where Corey was interviewing me. And one of the things that I said was Yang's policies would be extremely good for corporate America. They and that's not a bad thing. If the average person has more money to spend, right, they're going to spend it in businesses in their community. that's going to be good for small local businesses. It's going to be good for local coffee shops and restaurants. It's going to be good for Amazon even, right?
Mhm.
People have more discretionary income. They're going to go on Amazon and buy video games or whatever the heck, right? So this is a good thing for corporate America. And I think that if Yang gets third place in a state and looks like a real contender, then corporate America will start funneling money his way. The only reason they're not right now is because they think he's too much of a long shot. They if they're going to invest money in somebody, they want a return, right?
Yeah.
And so that means that they want to actually get the person elected. And a return doesn't have to mean a quid pro quo. It just means that like maybe they're supporting Yang because again, his policies would be excellent for business. They'd be excellent for the economy, but they're not going to get that return on their investment of his policies going into effect unless he wins. So I think we need to focus on helping him get third place in the state. And then I think the money problem will take care of itself because I think corporate America, they will jump ship from Trump and be giving money to Yang in the general election. And they should.
It's totally plausible. Yeah. And I think that watching
Trump
the burn
is terrible for business, by the way. Gosh.
Yeah, he's really, really good at hyperinflate, like blowing hot air into your 401k. But believe me, that's all coming back down.
Well, that wasn't even him. That was the Republicans in Congress. He had basically nothing to do with that apart from signing it.
He rubber stamped it and then bragged about it over and over and over and over and over again, which should surprise no one. So, like, I've been looking at the burn rate for the Yang campaign, and they've been extremely judicious. And I kind of hope they let the afterburners go in states like Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina early. And it's not going to surprise me. Like they probably will, right? Because they're going to understand that some version of this, right? Whether it's, third, fourth, fifth, or having to get third, the way Rio was saying, they're going to know that you have to spend that stuff early. And the more momentum we have, the more times you're going to be able to go back to the well and say, hey, Yang Gang, we need to rock and roll, and that'll be there. And again, I have to say, all of that can get, you can beat the money game. Many candidates have now been proving it over and over and over again. You can absolutely outperform by up to 10-1 by having enough people on the ground, doing the phone banking, doing the door-to-door stuff, and doing the text banking now, which is really, really easy to do. Like that stuff does work as much, if not better, than just blanket advertising. Even though we are actually going after a lot of Biden's voters now, so we might actually have to get on TV.
Let me make an analogy, which I think builds on your points around the need to make some moves early. Like, do you guys ever play poker?
I played it in Germany with my family recently, and I won.
So, like in poker tournaments, like everybody starts with the same amount of money, and if you lose a bunch of hands, you get to a point where you have a choice. You can like nurse the stack that you have and just lose a little bit every hand, and you basically become irrelevant because if you make a big move when you get a big hand later, if you don't have any chips to bet, you're not going to win that much. And so my position would be like fourth quarter is when we kind of push the chips in, and while we still have a stack, and we say, okay, I'm going to spend a lot of that money that I just raised because I need to get at least a fifth place. Maybe we disagree on whether he needs to be fifth or fourth or third, but we could probably agree if the dude is sixth, it's going to be tough. I mean,
yeah, he needs to do
agree that fifth is better than sixth.
and we would also agree that once you're at, we don't need charts for that one, but if you have sixth, your likelihood of doing anything close to fourth or third in New Hampshire is very distant.
Yep.
Your ability to raise more money is even further improbable. And so you kind of want to really go for it in Iowa, even if you run all the way down to zero in your bank account, because if you we'll take the other extreme, you get third in Iowa, that money will flow like overnight. That money will flow.
Yep.
You're completely right. Go all in on Iowa. I can't disagree.
I would flatten that out to the top three.
Maybe Iowa and New Hampshire, but I don't know if you wait too long. If you have, like, I guess we can't afford a very poor showing in Iowa.
Right. That's true.
I mean, if you have like a distant six, it's basically.
I think it's pretty much done at that point. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now let me show you. I have some more data. I do have some other data for you guys. Let me show you something.
What? You have data, Tom?
I love it, dude. I love this shit.
That's good.
All right.
That
So
best.
here is the CNN, MSNBC, Fox News candidate mentions per day. I mean, when you look at on 1024, Biden gets mentioned almost 400 times, Warren almost 200 times. Where the hell's Yang? 0 on 1024. So whereas Castro gets 9, and based on Steyer spending, you could imagine every mention is worth something like $1,000, right?
Probably way more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because it's not an ad that people are going to ignore.
yeah.
So every day you have Biden getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of free media coverage. You have, Sanders almost 100,000, Warren couple 100,000. Even Beto and Klobuchar getting $15,000 worth of coverage, and Yang's getting like 0, 1, or 2. And so this is why I kind of feel like the media, whatever implicit or purposeful bias against Yang needs to be overcome. And that's why for me, the number is 30 million in fourth quarter. I think he needs to raise some serious dough so that he can put that to work big time for Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina.
Yeah.
And that's where we can have control. Like he raised 10 last quarter. If everybody gives 3x, it's done.
That's true. Well, and I think that becomes its own sort of news story that can't be ignored as well, even though they will try. Let's face facts. I mean, they're gonna make a concerted attempt. And honestly, I don't think it's even nefarious anymore. I think it just doesn't fit the narrative. So he's difficult to plug in, even though they've been trying to plug him in here and there. That's like, honestly, the media is going to be the media. We either learn to run the media the way Trump did, frankly, but without being a raging jerk nozzle.
He also had fame.
Right,
we have to be fame going into it. Trump also had fame going into it, which helped. Right,
it's true. Well, and a made up person.
No, I mean, let's be clear about this. The media only cares really about one thing, and that is making money. Right. So it's not that there's some global conspiracy or anything like that. Right. They're companies that are looking to make money, and they're going to put up stuff that they think their viewers want to see because that's how they make money. So we need to vote with our eyes and our ears. We need to support shows like this.
Why do you think they think they'll make more money by over covering Booker and Castro?
Part of the narrative.
Right, exactly. Go ahead, Corey. I think you've got a good handle on that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's recursive confirmation bias, right? So you have the vast majority of people that are watching TV, especially during the day, right, where a lot of these things are mentions are going to accrue, are gray hairs or blue hairs, and right, like anything that falls outside of the common narrative that they're used to hearing, they're going to probably tune out. Like they probably actually got listener data on the fact that if you bring Yang up, like 5 old people are gonna be like, who is this guy? This is really interesting. And 1,000 of them are gonna be like, I need more orange juice. And it's just not gonna register.
No, it's honestly, it's the fault of the consumers of media. That's really what it comes down to. The media is going to give consumers what they want. And if people tune into, I mean, I don't know about you, I don't get my news from Fox News or MSNBC, right? Or CNN. Like, that's not where an informed person goes to get more informed. That's where you go for infotainment, to tune out, have a beer, and listen to Rachel Maddow or whoever, go off for an hour saying things that you agree with because it makes you feel good about yourself. That's the problem. And so if Yang isn't in the narrative, he's not, it's probably related to the reason that he doesn't have activist support, right? He doesn't have activist support because he's not a lifelong Democrat who's built up ties with activists, right? Yeah, he's not a politician who's spent decades building up ties with the media. He's not part of the narrative. He's not part of the he's not what their viewers want.
And that's
they don't know that they would want him.
That's exactly.
That's not the point. The media is not there to try to change anybody's mind. They're there to make money.
So then how do you overcome that? That sounds like a pretty tough disadvantage.
It is. You have to constantly be a news story. You have to find a way to be a news story. And usually that is by, going after your opponents or being, like being flashy and shiny, which of course Yang doesn't necessarily do because he doesn't have to. He's got the freaking data and the solutions. So like that might not be the way. One of the people commenting, Houston Operations Yang Gang, shout out to you guys, was talking about Facebook ads. So get this, right now, Trump is outspending every single Democratic candidate combined on Facebook. And he's right? Like that's the low hanging fruit. If you want to spend actual dollars that turn into actual people on the ground, which is the thing that, again, like if you want to go force multiplier to force multiplier, you do a little bit on TV just so you're on there. Like you don't need to be 7 times a day. You can be 1 and have almost the same amount of impact and dump giant amounts of money into Facebook, but where you're actually getting Facebook people into groups and signing people up to actually work on the ground, which I think would be an amazing pipeline.
Yeah, and local television, and of course on Facebook, you can target people in Iowa, for example.
You
right?
can target specific
people in
counties.
Iowa, and you could make part of your goal is to get. He should be running ads right now. Hopefully, he is. That are intended to get people's email addresses so in Iowa, so that when it comes time for them to go knock on doors, he's got 10,000 people in Iowa ready to do that.
Well, they should be doing it now. This is the thing, like. Warren's had people knocking on doors in Iowa for a year. So is Bernie.
No, that too.
Like if we want to actually be doing damage on the ground, he needs to have a team on the ground in Iowa that is working 24 hours a day, not later, right now.
Yeah, so I agree with Tom. We need to raise a ton of money and we need to spend a whole bunch of it on the early states.
And
here is where our country gets their information.
You can.
1 out of 4 find cable TV news to be most helpful. And we know the number 1 cable news station is Fox. This is what
the others aren't any good either.
Yeah.
Right. Talk about the mother of all false equivalents.
I'm not saying that they're equivalent. No, in fact, I think Corey, like I would say MSNBC is more on my side than it is on the side of progressives, right? They're very like moderate, conservative, corporate Dem.
Both are not covering Yang either. Doesn't even matter. Like it's not like MSNBC is like awesome for Yang. So hopefully we raise a shit ton of money and we just buy access to those voters, and then it starts this snowball. But it's going to be tough. Hey, I know we're at the hour mark. I figured what we could do is maybe take some questions from the audience, and then we can wrap up. Or were there like some hot topics that we didn't get to that you guys wanted to cover?
No, I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah.
All right, guys in the chat box, go ahead and start entering your questions. And then while we're waiting for them to roll in, I'm going to ask the first one of you two, which is this whole impeachment thing seems to be sucking up a lot of oxygen in terms of people's attention, such that they're less likely to really get to know the non-usual suspect candidates. And so I wonder if this whole impeachment thing, well, on the one hand, as an American, I think that this is right and we should honor the Constitution. And if he's guilty, then we should investigate and prosecute him. On the other hand, as a Yang supporter, I'm like, oh, God, dude, like, people, we can't keep talking about Trump all day long because then they're not going to be learning about Yang. What are you guys thinking about impeachment's impact on the Yang gang?
Do you want to go first, Corey, or should I?
Sure. No, I mean that I spend, I do, a lot of media even outside moving forward, right? Like it's the thing that I do the most often. I spend most of that time talking about Trump. He's the elephant in the room until we take out the giant proverbial non-literal elephant gun and shoot him politically in the face. But yeah, I mean, like you can't not talk about it. It's the biggest thing out there. I'm sort of hoping that it allows actually more room for a quiet insurgency candidate to be, taking up oxygen by just doing more events, doing the kind of thing that's going on. And again, we keep coming back to this, but Yang Gang actually signing up to do events, to do door knocking, to do like the sign hanging events on bridges and the tables and the phone banking and the text banking, all that kind of thing. That's the edge, right? That's what not everybody else is doing anywhere near as effectively. So yeah, it's happening whether we like it or not, right? So it's not like they're going to stop impeaching. So it's a matter of trying to figure out how to jujitsu that into an advantage over other candidates that are going to be experiencing the same problem that we're going to be experiencing.
What do you think, Rio?
I agree with Tom. I think that it's overall bad. I think that it's bad for the Democratic Party, and it's especially bad for minor candidates like Yang. We're actually going to try to talk less about the horse race and less about impeachment and 2020 and that kind of stuff on our show. We already do mostly policy. But we recently had an internal conversation where we're like, you know what, everybody's talking about that. Let's get back to what we do best, which is where, we talk about policy and we try to find compromise between right and left so that we can move forward as a country and get away from the toxic polarization. The truth of the matter is toxic polarization benefits extremists like Trump. Yeah. And they benefit when they can convince, and Trump tries this. He says, if you don't support me, then you're a communist, right? And then you'll hear a lot of people on the far left will say like, well, if you're a corporate Dem, right, and not like a basically a socialist Dem, then you're on Trump's side, right? And they both do that because it benefits both of them to erase the center and to tell people that their only choice is between one extreme and the other extreme, because then people in the center are forced to, choose the lesser of two evils out of two extremes. So Trump is actually goading the Democratic Party into impeaching him. He wants them to impeach him because he knows the Senate won't remove him, and it's going to backfire on the Democrats. They're going to lose because of it.
Hey, do you want to put money on that on Nerds for Yang?
No, wait a minute. Let me clarify. If he gets reelected, then he absolutely should be impeached.
It won't last that long. That doesn't even matter. He's going to get impeached before then.
Well, it may be. I mean, and again, I obviously agree with you guys. He's done multiple impeachable offenses. He's publicly admitted to them, right? Like, why else would he be doing that other than the fact that he's like, I dare you to impeach me? He's so cynical.
He is scared shitless of impeachment.
I don't think
scared out of his mind of impeachment, and you can see it in everything that he's now doing and making up and lying about it. To a narcissistic psychopath like Trump, the worst thing in the world is going to the World Series, and you could see it when people started booing, like he gasped like he was having a heart attack. And
that's true.
I hate feeling good about watching somebody have a mental breakdown, but I did. That won't ever go away, right? So here's what we know. The impeachment thing is going very, very quickly now. There's probably going to be a vote before Christmas. The only question that I have in my mind is Mitch McConnell actually going to have a fair and equitable hearing in the Senate? I have a weird suspicion that he might, because there's not going to necessarily be a way to get around this. And at some point, they will be thinking, Rio, what you've been saying about conservatives for quite a while. They don't like this guy either. Right? Like the sort of elitist Republicans, if you can call them that, I'm being super generous. They don't like this. They realize that eventually this chicken's going to come home to roost.
Yeah, but it's all about his base. Okay, it's kind of like the conversation we had about the media. Like it's sort of like a get out of jail free card. This is part of what I don't like about the populist narrative. It's always the fault of the elites. It's the media's fault. It couldn't possibly be because the average American prefers garbage, and that's why they tune into Fox instead of reading The Economist, right? And same thing here.
Shots
like,
fired.
Yeah. So like you're right. The establishment of the GOP, most of the people in Congress in the Republican Party don't like Trump any more than I do. Okay.
All right, we got to move on to the.
Wait, I got to finish really quickly.
Hey,
the reason they're not going to remove him is because of his base. As long as something like 30% of Americans continue to support him, as long as a majority of Republican voters continue to support Trump, he won't get removed.
Yeah, well, if the percentage for removal goes past 58%, that'll be higher than Nixon, and he will. That's my little hot take for right now. And that's only trending in one direction, and we ain't even done. So
maybe we should actually make a bet.
It's 3 points away, dude. Like, again, like if you'd asked me 3 months ago if he was going to get removed, I would have said hard no. There's no way you're going to get 20 Republican senators. Now, I don't know.
All right, I apologize. I broke your rule. We were talking too much about Trump. So let me someone was asking in the chat about the TV ad. So let me see if I can try and share it and we can watch it together.
That'd be great.
Works. Hold on 1 second.
We are not the first presidential campaign or family to have had special needs or autistic children. For whatever reason, I think we may be the first to talk about it openly.
If you have a child with special needs, it's expensive. If you don't have access to good health care, families literally have nothing.
We need to move towards a Medicare for all system where every American has access to quality and affordable services and start supporting families in a real way.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the first ads that he's running in the early states. Yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the first one.
So yeah, he's basically he's throwing himself directly at just the normal Democratic voter period as an introduction, which I think is super smart, right? That's if you ask issues of any Democratic voter, it's going to be, oh my God, we got to get rid of Trump, but probably healthcare first, right? So he's going after the note that he needs to hit, and also showing himself as like a human normal person.
I think he's trying to undermine attacks by Bernie Sanders people who say that Yang's version of Medicare for all is insufficient. I think he's trying to signal to voters that I'm for Medicare for all, so don't believe those Bernie bros when they say otherwise.
Yeah,
because when it comes to like local state politics like that, it's about the dinner table conversations.
I love the ad for multiple reasons. I love it because it wasn't about UBI, and a lot of the criticism from people is like, oh, he's kind of a one-note candidate, and a lot of people are familiar at least with the basics of UBI. Although I hope in the future there will be some UBI ads, but I think for the first one, not talking about UBI was great to kind of show that he's got more kind of dimensions than just the freedom dividend. Secondly, when you look at the surveys of the most important topics to Democratic voters, healthcare is number one. So I think it's important to do that. Thirdly, shows the family man, Evelyn, the kids, that he's not 75 years old. That's great, right? He's like, oh, wow, he's got like children that are not his like great grandchildren, right?
I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's solid, man. I'm very pleased with that ad, and I think it shows good judgment from old Andrew. So let's see. Next question: are you guys going to Yangapalooza in? I think that's in Iowa, right? It's coming up. The concert thing.
No, I have no plans to go to Iowa as of yet.
Yeah, I'm not going.
Yeah, me. I would love to go, but my day job and living in Europe makes going to Iowa hard. But one of these days, I think it would be super cool to go to these early primary states. I think I'm very jealous of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, because Fred's going to be there. I've been seeing all these videos, a bunch of people hanging on the back of Fred's truck and having a good time. I'm like, oh, jealous.
Dude, Fred is great. Did you see that video of Fred recording a video, and then some dude was like getting in his grill about, hey, don't you put a camera, and he's like, it's pointing at me. It's pointing at me. And when I had previously interviewed Fred on this channel, he talked about how in prison people would get up in his shit, and he would like stay calm, and they would back off. And that was we saw that shit on video where, honestly, if someone were all angry and screaming at me, I would probably be like, hey, sorry, I'll turn it off. But I wouldn't keep recording and saying, no, it's pointing at, like that's good old Fred, man. He doesn't mess around. Fred's the kind of guy, like if you got into a bar fight, you definitely want Fred on your side.
Oh yeah. Well, and honestly, like that kind of standing your ground is what stops bar fights.
Yeah. I would not be as effective. I would toss a bottle or something. I try to help out where I can.
There you go.
All right, let's see.
Here, if we get into a bar fight, like totally, I'm just gonna chuck this in there. If three of us get into a bar fight, I just want you to randomly just scream, "Hello, nerds!" like at the weirdest possible moment, because that will probably just be, everyone will be like, "What?" And they're like, "No, this guy is freaking famous." And then I'll buy him a beer because I'm a Canadian and I'm polite that way. And then
there you go.
If they're still assholes, then it'll be time to.
I'll be like, dude, here's a chart of what percent of people end up in the hospital and in jail after a bar fight.
Yes.
Let me just show you the probability
Data,
of us
guys.
all getting in jail. Who wants that? Here's the lost income from serving time.
Right?
All right.
Or we do a shot and everyone's fine.
Yeah, that's right. Or we get Fred in here and it'll be pointed at you, motherfuckers.
That's exactly it.
All right. So let's see. Next question. I think Yang polls will rise after Thanksgiving when the older they learn about Yang through the turkey dinner. I get it. I think that's possible. You know, I heard that
Me too.
happened with Obama.
Yep.
Where a lot of parents flipped from Hillary to Obama back in the day, you know, in 2008 or 7, I guess, because they were convinced by their kids. And so we might get a bump, but I think to Rio's point, we need more than a bump. We need
more than a bump. I'm actually visiting my mom in La Jolla outside San Diego right now, and I've convinced her to vote for Yang. So that's happening.
There you go. You didn't even wait for Thanksgiving.
She's also a Republican.
Yeah, 2008. That's exactly how it went in my family. I convinced my family, like, no, seriously, you got to listen to this guy because he's, you know.
I'm still working on my mom. She's now of the position that if a Democrat won, she would be okay with Yang.
Well, that's better than nothing.
I know. It's sad. I'm like, Mom, I have a whole fucking channel about this guy.
Yeah,
And
seriously.
But she's got Fox News on 24/7, man.
Yeah, that'll wreck your brain.
I'm looking forward to seeing Fox turn on Trump. That's going to be the most amusing thing to see.
Oh, that'll be fucking great. I mean, Shepard Smith,
some of them
he keeps it real.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I guess he's gone now, right? Shep left.
Yeah. He kept it so real. He's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go fishing. But like when anytime the legal stuff comes out, the people that actually have judge backgrounds, like Judge in Balltown or whatever, like they're the ones that just come out and say, no.
Yeah.
What Trump just said is just completely and totally freaking ridiculous. This is actually against the law.
You're starting to see cracks.
Yeah. Significant ones. And they're trying to clamp it down. I mean, that, you know, getting rid of like the top sort of primetime people in their channel because they just couldn't carry water for this freaking asshat anymore. And it's a big deal.
Any non-Trump related questions in there?
Yes. Sorry. We keep. He's like a magnet. He's like this black hole that sucks our energy. All right. What TV ad would you guys make for Yang?
Oh my.
So, I mean, in the space where the sort of Medicare for all one has gone away already, I would want it to be on Facebook. I would want it to be about UBI and to have basically to lay out the core argument that the financial crisis that you know we've gone through, that we're going to see another version of before too long, the destruction of unions, all of these things, right? That and everything that led to Trump, because you're putting that through the way that he makes that argument, and tying it to locally, right? Imagine instead of the oil companies getting subsidized or Wall Street getting subsidized or the car companies getting subsidized, your county would get tens of millions of dollars in subsidies every single month going directly to people just like you and also you, right? Like that, people don't get yet how epic things will be on the ground if UBI gets passed. They just, outside of the Yang Gang anyway, right? Like the Yang Gang people are like, I'm preaching to the choir and I get that. But that, I would love to see that, especially on Facebook, where that can redound to people going to the Rogan podcast or going wherever they're going to go to get more long form thing to understand, that the 100 things about Yang that make us like him more and more, that the more that we see of him, and then redound to people that are identifying as Yang Gang and actually want to do work on the ground. That's what I would like.
You would go for a big UBI, like transformational policy kind of narrative.
Yeah, because it's not just about the ad. I don't want to just shift the poll numbers. I want people working on the ground, because that means you use you basically have the force multiplier of putting money on Facebook, where it's actually going to have more of an impact, but to people that will actually be impacted, that will then have a higher likelihood of wanting to actually do work on the ground. And you can do that nationally, because you can have people phone banking and text banking into Iowa from anywhere on earth.
I agree with I agree with Corey. I think that Yang's strategy of saying, look, the reason Trump got elected is because we automated away a bunch of jobs in certain swing states. I think I would start with him saying that. and then, show automation, maybe even reference like factories in Iowa that are doing it right now, right? Talk a little bit about the number of jobs that are expected to be lost to automation in, the next 20 years or whatever, right? And then talk about UBI and talk about it as a stimulus of the local economy and how that would be good for local businesses and entrepreneurship and all of that fun stuff. The one thing I would, and I agree with Corey, it should be on Facebook, but the one thing I would add is I think he needs to do a shorter version of that on television as well. And there too, I agree with Corey. I don't think he needs to be, if you run an ad over and over and over again on television to the point where people are just annoyed, oh, it's that ad again, that actually, it's diminishing returns, right? So I would run that ad on TV, but not super often enough, once a day, twice a day. And then I do the Facebook ad. Yeah.
All right. Let me give you my dream scenario, which I think I'm going to tell you the ad I want to see. I don't know if it's the one he should run. But do you guys remember way back when Ross Perot ran for president?
Oh, yeah.
He would buy these like long kind of almost like infomercial spots. And he had a lot of charts. And I would, if I were running, involved in the Yang campaign, I would say, hey, let's make an ad that's targeted at these like 65 and older former business people who are really kind of like data driven and business minded. And he should show data on, number one, that 40% of the jobs in America are like clerical, retail, call center, truck driving. And these are the projections on the impact of automation. And then maybe the second one, he could talk about the average lifespan going down over time, and yet the amount we spend per person for healthcare going up. And then maybe the third one, whatever, some other important topic. But basically, and then he would say, hey, I have specific proposals that address each of these things that are endorsed by, economists from both parties, yada, yada. And I think it would position him as the very serious, thoughtful, smart, business-minded candidate. That's not going to do great with like the millennials and stuff, but we actually are weakest with the older people. And maybe we actually, if we ran all three of the ads that we just talked about, it would be fucking awesome. Maybe that's why we need the 30 mil.
Well, and I wonder, like, if you could target business owners on Facebook nationally, or like something like that, right? To go after that, because I talked to my buddy Mears, who owns a big plumbing company. He's a really good friend of mine. I showed him the Rogan thing, and he went from being like lifelong Republican, Corey's a communist, fuck off, to Yang is that, like, he was immediately Yang, like right off the bat, because he saw what that would do for demand at a local level, right? So I think that I think you're right about that, and it would almost have to be that you wouldn't like buying like 30 minutes worth of time on TV now is not the thing that it was when Ross Perot was doing it, right? Like there was still very little cable, like there was still like a lot of eyeballs in front of that. So you would almost want to get like a quick 30-second to 60-second Facebook and TV ad that led you to a campaign made 30 to 45 minute data-driven YouTube thing.
Yeah, maybe the landing page has the long one, and then you have these little teasers. Yeah, but make it compelling enough so that, hey, listen, business, there is a candidate out here right now that will do more for your business than any candidate ever running for president or state government in the history of the United States. You should probably take a look at it and know this isn't hyperbole. I've got the data. Yeah. I think that would.
Okay, here's a question. Do you guys think that he's going to sit down with Warren and show her the data?
Show me the data.
I do. I honestly think she'll sit down with him.
I think he will. I think he will because I think he wants the right thing to happen, and he wants people to be educated.
Right.
But I found that the fact that she publicly was dismissing automation before and then admitted not having seen the data was, to me, a disqualifying remark.
Yeah. I mean, dude, she was like, and again, as somebody who has liked Warren a bunch, the whole idea that she came out against automation, like, oh man, that answer was correct maybe in the 90s, like the early 90s, but it like to just be so devoid having a current understanding of how the economic situation is actually playing out on the ground was just exceptionally disappointing.
Yeah, that was
It's bad.
Yeah, bad. Not a winning moment for her, but she didn't. Nobody really got as disturbed by it as a lot of us did, because I was like, "What do you mean you haven't looked? You talk about having a plan for everything, and now you just said on national TV that I just haven't seen the data." I don't know. Anyway, here's the next question. What are your thoughts on Yang taking shots at the federal jobs guarantee and wealth tax in ads before the November debate to stir things up and control the narrative? So basically kind of picking fights with Bernie and Warren on their kind of signature policies.
I like that idea. I think that it's actually a way of talking about UBI that doesn't make him sound like a one-trick pony, right? Because he could be, and it does establish that he's a serious contender. So he doesn't even necessarily have to say Bernie Sanders wants a federal jobs guarantee.
Yeah.
He could just say, like some people have proposed a federal jobs guarantee. Here's why it wouldn't work, right? Or and here's an alternative in form of UBI. And the same thing with the wealth tax. With the wealth tax, he can he can point out that they had one in Europe, and he has pointed this out in text and tweets that they had one in Europe, and they all of them were eventually repealed because it didn't work, right? So you could just say this sounds nice, but we've tried it in other countries and it didn't work. So here's an alternative. We could do a VAT and a UBI.
Yeah, I would
totally
say
agree.
Yeah, a little leery on that, because I want to know, if you're going to put these things out, what voters are you going after, right? Because if you take shots at the federal jobs guarantee, you will get no Bernie supporters, right? Like that just simply will not. I think they're not low hanging fruit in that same way. I do agree that they should be done, but as backup to the UBI thing, right? Like the federal jobs guarantee, because I think it makes stronger voters of people that might be on the fence, right? So the federal jobs guarantee, we need a commercial out there that basically just says, listen, a federal jobs guarantee that is reminiscent of the glory days of the ramp up to World War II and run by a perfectly fantastic guy like FDR or Bernie, right? Say that as a nice thing. Imagine a federal jobs guarantee under Trump. And it immediately gets destroyed as an idea, and people should think twice about it. And you're right about the wealth tax. I mean, if you budget anything on a wealth tax, rich people are going to find a way not to give you that money. And it's been proven time and time again.
Well, I mean, really, he could do an ad about the VAT, because if a lot of Democrats want to make rich people pay taxes, right? And the fact is, income taxes are a tax on labor, and they're a tax on the middle class. They don't actually effectively tax rich people, because if you do a job, the company you're working for is motivated to actually report that they're paying you, because they get to write it off on their own taxes, right? Whereas if you are earning income from some way other than a job, it's a lot easier to hide it or get around it or find loopholes, right? And so the thing about a VAT is it's the only way to actually tax big companies like Amazon and stuff with any success. And therefore also, you're also taxing Bezos, indirectly. So I think he can make a strong argument for a VAT being the only way to achieve the goal that Democrats want of actually bringing revenue in from rich people instead of just sucking it out of the paychecks of the middle class.
And that attacks the main candidates who are going after saying, listen, like Bezos didn't pay any taxes, yada, yada. Their plans don't actually tax Bezos that much. All he needs to do is create an interesting little trust and it's gone. Like, it doesn't go after production, and it doesn't go after all the ways that a technological and an exponentially advancing technological society is going to be increasing, like the VAT is going to.
I wanted to address the federal jobs guarantee thing too, because Corey pointed out you're not going to get any Bernie Sanders supporters. The thing is, remember last time, 2015, Sanders was almost 50%, right?
Yeah.
Was what he was at. He's down to 15% now. He's actually dropped. At this point, I don't know if any of the people who are still supporting him are gettable.
That was my point entirely.
So what I would be trying to do with the federal jobs guarantee is contrasting it with the federal jobs guarantee for people who, as you said, are on the fence who are thinking about maybe supporting Sanders, but are not gung-ho enthusiastic Bernie Sanders supporters yet. And they think like, wait, this guy wants to do what? He wants, because like, yes, I've kept ramping up to World War II. Like, yes, of course, like we put a lot of people to work, but they weren't guaranteed. I mean, a guaranteed job means you don't even have to do it. You don't even have to show up. You can't be fired.
Yeah.
And taxpayers are going to pay for it. And if you think about the future of automation, that means that we could be looking at a dystopian future where basically the government is employing 90% of the population, and in order to pay their salaries, they have to tax the same 90%.
Yeah, it's
so circular. They're going to take the money out of your pocket as soon as they give it to you.
And it's power. Like if you're truly anti-corporation, and you think for a second that a federal jobs guarantee isn't going to get taken over like low-cost housing, and Trump's dad basically ran that in New York, right? Like it's going to be a massive power grab, the likes of which this country's never seen except under healthcare, and none of us will like it.
It would lead to state capitalism like China. That's what it would be.
Yeah. Well, let me wrap with this question. I mean, I agree with everything you guys said about the tax policy. It just makes no sense to do it the way. I mean, I live in Europe, and I know a lot of people who lived under the wealth tax, and there was a whole business about that cropped up on how to basically avoid the wealth tax, and it wasn't that hard.
Right. It never will be.
I live in Switzerland. Anyway, so here's the last question. Do you feel like Yang needs to draw sharper contrast with the other candidates in the next debate? So as an example, he and Warren got into like a slight disagreement over automation, but it was very gentle. And at some point, like if you're in the 2 to 3% range and you want to kind of punch up, you may want to kind of push a little harder. Other people say like, hey, if he gets too nasty, it like Buttigieg kind of looked kind of like a jerk in some moments when he was like dismissive.
Wasn't a fan.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Do you think Yang needs to turn up the heat a little bit, or just stay like Mr. Math guy and be positive?
Going back to who the most gettable voters I believe are, which are Biden's, because nobody's voting for him on purpose. Seriously, it's just name recognition. And can we please go back to what reminds me of Obama?
And that he's the only alternative to the left wing of the party.
Well, fine, right? So identify yourself. Honestly, like Warren opened up an avenue already. So if he hasn't sat down with him, he can dig into that. So basically, as a progressive, I'm saying this, which pains me. But because the progressive vote is largely locked up, and not locked up, you're going to get people like me that are actually paying attention to want to dig into it. They're going to figure out very quickly that Yang is going to do a hell of a lot more than Warren or Bernie could possibly do. But I would want him creating stark contrasts with those two, because the rest of voters are looking potentially for an option that isn't 900 years old, and they would find it in Andrew Yang.
I liked what he did in the last debate. I thought that it was by far his best debate. He didn't punch up per se, but what he did was he was part of the conversation, right? In past debates, he would just kind of like state a statement to the people, and he didn't really feel like he was part of the conversation, right? So being part of the conversation means that you actually engage in a little back and forward, right? It doesn't have to be nasty, right? It could just be like, I agree with you about that, but I disagree with you about this, and here's why. And then you turn to the people, having established a contrast, and you make the case for why, right? And he did that very well in the last one, so I would just like to see him do more of it. And related to what we said about how he needs to get third place in an early state, or fifth place is certainly better than sixth. Fifth is certainly better than sixth, but I think he needs to get third. But that said, he needs to do the same thing with the debates. He needs to play the long game, and he needs to stay on the debate stage. If he can still be up there when it's just him and Biden and Warren and Sanders, that would be amazing. I think he would run away with it after that. When it's him and four other people, the media has to give him equal time, because it would be very obvious to everybody watching if they didn't at that point, right? Then that's really the time that he could actually go for the jugular. But in the meantime, I don't think he should be nasty in order to not look the way Buttigieg did, mainly.
Yeah,
and yes, he needs to
agreed.
be part of the conversation. He needs to actually contrast himself more. And it was great too that some of the candidates actually mentioned him. Some of the other candidates mentioned him, like my friend Andrew Yang says, or even attacked him. Like, oh my gosh, whenever one of them attacks him, that is only good for Yang.
Gold.
Yeah. That's great. He if anything he can do, I don't know what you can do, but anything he can do to get Biden to attack Yang would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, like 10 being like hyper aggressive, 5 being like maybe where Harris was, and 1 being like super non-confrontational. I feel like the first couple of debates, he was more like a 1.5 or 2. And this last one, he got to like 3, maybe 3.5.
Yeah.
I would like to see him get to 4. And even if it's just like Rio, like you said, if he just says, you know what, I disagree with you on this point, that alone is like, ooh, what's going on here?
Right.
That would be great.
It's legitimacy, right? I mean, that, he's an insurgent candidate in the Democratic Party, and creating those relationships kind of on the fly, becoming visible for people that aren't, in this 24 hours a day, like some of us are.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it goes a long way.
It could be more hard hitting than just I disagree. Like with Sanders, he could say, I believe you have good intentions with your federal
which he always does.
guarantee.
I love that. Yeah.
I believe you have good intentions with it, but here's why I think that won't work. And
badly.
Here's an alternative, right? That's pretty hard hitting.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
And he just hasn't really gone that far. I think he's always been talking about his solution, but he has refrained from saying, I don't think your solution is the best solution, and here's why.
Even having, and this is gonna sound horrible, but having sound bites, like at some point in the debate, can anyone imagine a federal jobs guarantee run by Trump? And just wait for it, right? Like, what are you? That's crazy, right? Every single place that a wealth tax has been tried, it's failed.
That is the problem with most like top-down authoritarian style policies, is that you're kind of forgetting that at some day in the future, somebody you disagree with is going to be in power,
right.
And so there is a reason there checks and balances and decentralization of power exist for a reason. And Yang is he gets attacked for being a libertarian plant or whatever, but like he is libertarian in the sense of being on the bottom half of the political axis, right? Like he believes in bottom up solutions that empower people. By the way, I do think we need to start wrapping up. But by the way, in terms of an ad in Iowa that could make a really big difference, he could do that. He could say, like, look, there's at least 2 ways of achieving our party's goals. One of them is this top-down approach, and the other is a bottom-up approach. I'm the bottom-up candidate, and here's my case for being the bottom-up candidate. And if you think that's a better idea, I'm the guy for you.
Guys, we are gonna wrap up. I just want to thank you for coming on to the Nerds for Yang show. And for those who are watching this, who are like, I kind of like this Corey and Rio combo. They're interesting. Where can they find more of this Corey Rio cocktail?
So you can go to movingforwardpod.com, or you can check us out on Twitter. I'm at Corey Cottrell. And I believe that Rio is at Rio Republican, because he's eventually going to take over the Republican Party and change it into something that isn't so obnoxiously gross, which I am for the record. So yeah, that would be how. Or you can find us on Anchor. Most of the podcast things you can find us pretty easy now.
Yeah, if you're on Apple Podcast, just search for Moving Forward on there, and you'll find us.
There you go.
Yeah, moving forward. A little trouble trying to find it. I actually had a little trouble trying to find it on the Android podcast app. So definitely go to movingforwardpod.com, and that's probably the guaranteed way to find it.
Yeah.
And hopefully everybody who's interested should subscribe and follow Corey and Rio, not just on the podcast, but on Twitter. They are clearly super opinionated, super interesting fellas. And we're definitely going to at least agree that 5 is better than 6.
Nailed it. Consensus achieved.
Nerds, baby. Nerd power.
I think we probably agreed about more than that.
We did. But on basic math, we nailed it. I think that was a
I
strong
think
showing.
we should make a T-shirt 5 greater than 6. All right, guys, have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
All right,
Keep it real.
thanks a
So
lot, man.
5 isn't greater than 6.
That is, yeah, that makes a really funny T-shirt. So there you go.
That's a good point. 5 is less than 6, unless it's
Yeah.
negative. Well,
Unless
negative
it's in
5 is
Iowa.
greater than -5 is greater than -6.
There you go.
Okay,
There you go.
fair enough.
We
All
have a
right.
correction there.
All right.
See you guys later. Keep it
See you,
real.
man. Thanks, Tom.